Okay, welcome to Russian History with Dr. Brovkin. Today we'll continue with Russia after Alexander II. So our topic is revolutionary movement in Russia. What we have to understand is what exactly happened after these great reforms, that there was a revolutionary movement that appeared in Russia that would change the world. It goes straight up to the Russian Revolution, that ended up as a communist revolution, and that pretty much changed the world history after that. So this is why we have to look at the very, very beginning. There was no revolutionary movement in Russia at the time of Nicholas the First. Yes, some people say there are some antecedents in the Decembrist uprising, but this is still not quite a revolutionary movement. These were officers who tried to stage a coup d'etat, as they did on many occasions in the past, in 18th century, when they overthrew Peter III. So, in a sense, the revolutionary movement does start in the age of Alexander II. It does start with what we talked about earlier, the conflict of fathers and sons, the preoccupation with materialism, with revolutionary ideas, the guilt feeling of the young people that their parents had abused the peasants, the kind of a worshipping of Narod, the Russian folk, the people, the coming to Russia of these ideas from Germany of Herder, das Volk, the people, the peasants are the carriers of national culture, national identity, national pride. So they begin this kind of a fashion of, as in Germany, as in Italy, of identifying with the peasants as the true barriers of a national culture. But all of that doesn't still explain why revolutionary movement. Yes, this national identity is coming, pride to being Russia is coming, fine. Why revolutionary movement in the way that it's shaped up? Now, the first stage, of course, is the assassination of the Tsar, and these are the People's Will. So this is a secret organization that's called People's Will. And they think that People's Will is to kill the Tsar. Now, as I said earlier, they are totally obsessed with the murder of the Tsar, and they just keep trying until they do it. But it would be wrong to think of them as a kind of cold-blooded murderers. These people are students, the young people, and they're from very well-educated families. So they're kind of like, in the 1960s in the United States, you had well-to-do kids from middle class who were most, engaged in the civil rights movement or anti-war in Vietnam movement. So these people basically feel that there is this revenge, that this is payback to the landlords and the Tsar, who is the biggest landlord, for the abuse of Russian peasants. So that's the simplest way to, this is the payback for serfdom. So that's how they would rationalize. And you have to restore justice and punish the guilty ones. And the Tsar is the guilty ones. Now, they, of course, were totally wrong because this particular Tsar wasn't guilty of anything. He is the Tsar liberator. Maybe Nicholas I was, yes, perhaps, and the other ones who did not do anything to abolish serfdom, but certainly not Alexander II. So these people, as I said before, are terrorists. They are narodniks, which in the sense that they are a part of the going to the people movement, of those that want to serve the great Russian people and serve them in the villages and work with their statisticians and teachers and all kinds of other auxiliary help to the people. So this is one side, and the most important one. Out of this group, they will develop a political party which would be called PSR, Party of Socialist Revolutionaries. And this is actually the most important political party that's totally forgotten now. But in 1917, they will be the ones that would form the provisional government. They will be the ones who would have 1 million members as opposed to 200,000 communists. So they're the biggest political party by 1917, Party of Socialist Revolutionaries. Now, these people are not Marxists. They are not even anarchists in the sense of Spain or Italy. They are two wings. The huge majority are those kinds of people who work in the villages, who are intelligentsia working with the peasants, teaching them, their mission in life is to promote education and well-being of the Russian peasants. That's the vast majority of them, statisticians and teachers and milkmaids in village schools, who abandon good life and career and money for the noble cause of helping their peasants. But a small minority of them say that's not good enough. And these are also students, also from the same kind of families. And they engage in terrorist activity. And that continues after Alexander II. They continue. And they try to kill Alexander III. And in fact, they did blow up a train that he was in. And he had to carry, he was a very strong man, Alexander III. He kind of, on his own hands, he maintained the ceiling of a train car that would have collapsed, and then it would have squashed his wife and his children. So he actually carried it on his shoulders, which was too heavy, and it kind of undermined his spine, and in the end he did die. So you could say they did kill him. He didn't die immediately, but he only reigned for about 10 years, and that is because of that assassination that he died in the end. So, and they did try to kill Nicholas II many times. It didn't work. So that was a kind of a tradition. They decided that you have to not only glorify Russian peasants and serve them, but you have to kill the Tsar. And what happens after that? In their discussions, what happens after that? Didn't quite know. But there was one man, and as a matter of fact, my very first article that I published many years ago was about that man. His name was Pyotr Tkachев, and he was a minor young man in the revolutionary movement, but he wrote a very interesting article that was a little book that he published later. He basically said that what happens after we kill the Tsar? Well, what happens after we have to seize power by a revolutionary action of professional revolutionaries. We have to destabilize the government to a point that it is no longer capable of action, and then a dedicated minority will seize power in the capital. And then it would start transforming society and punishing the guilty. So nobody paid attention to this, but of course, if you compare later on his ideas with what Lenin did, Vladimir Lenin, you would see that in many ways, Lenin accomplished that which Pyotr Tkachев wrote about in the 1870s. Okay, so this is the direction of one, which is called the populists, or people's will, and the terrorists who continue to be one part of the Party of Socialist Revolutionaries that does become legal under Nicholas II later on in early 20th century. They become a legal political party. They publish newspapers. They have a delegation in the Duma, in the parliament that would be established under the reforms of Nicholas II. And a small part of them will be terrorists. My friend and colleague, Anna Geifman, who is a professor at Boston University, she wrote a book about SR terrorists. She collected amazing data that they killed hundreds, and I say hundreds, of Tsarist officials, especially after 1905 revolution. So that trend of Russian revolutionary movement continued. Terrorism is a big issue that they actually would ambush and kill policemen, mayors, governors. One of their biggest target hits was the Prime Minister Stolypin in 1908, who was Prime Minister under Nicholas II. So Russia was literally going through the age of terrorism that had no equivalent in Western Europe. Perhaps one can compare it to ETA in Spain, that they were just killing, and it was like a civil war at certain points. But that is something that has to be kept in mind, this part of Russian revolutionary movement. However, they're almost forgotten, and the whole attention of everybody who studies Russian revolutionary movement is focused on the Marxists and the future Bolsheviks. So let me explain who these people are and how did they come about. So it's usually connected with two names. One of them is Vladimir Lenin, it was Lenin is his pen name. He's actually Ulyanov. So he's exactly like that kind of a radical revolutionary student of the 70s and 80s. His brother was in fact a terrorist who actually was executed for making a bomb. And some biographers of Lenin say that it produced a big impression on Vladimir, and he was very upset and hated this regime because of the death of his brother. But whether it's true or not, but in all the narrations of the history of the Russian revolutionary movement, there's a moment where young Lenin says, "We will go another way." Now, whether this is true, whether he actually said those words or not, is kind of irrelevant because he did. They did go another way, another from the one chosen by the socialist revolutionaries, SRs. And another way was basically to mobilize the workers. So this is the beginning of a Marxist movement that focuses not on peasants, but on workers. And so Lenin writes his first book, The Coming of Capitalism to Russia. He loves it. He's absolutely, collecting all kinds of data that proves and shows that capitalism, yes, has come to Russia. Russia has an enormous success in takeoff development. It goes into 10% a year, especially under Prime Minister Witte in the 1890s. So Lenin writes his book, yeah, finally we have capitalism, therefore we're going to have workers, therefore we're going to have a proletarian revolution, just as Karl Marx wrote in his book. So Lenin is one of those, together with Martov, Julius Martov, who organizes in first Social Democratic Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, Russian Social Democrats that are totally modeled on the German ones, and they are actually beginning agitation and propaganda and organization of work among Russian workers, trying to go that same way of mobilizing the workers for the proletarian revolution against capitalist oppression. So here is what everybody agrees, but here what I'm going to say is not what everybody else is saying, and this would be my difference from the mainstream. The mainstream books on Russian revolutionary movement all say that Lenin was a Marxist and he created a Marxist revolutionary party. So I remember once I gave a lecture where I argued that Lenin was not a Marxist. And so I continue to believe so, and I'm going to try to assert that now. Lenin is not a Marxist. Why is that? Because Marx, the very nature of Marxism, is dialectic stages of economic development that goes past the stage of capitalism, then the accumulation of the means of production in the hands of the few leads to a takeover of the means of production by the working class, who is a majority of the population, and then you have a socialist revolution, and this is pretty much what happened in Western Europe. And then you have dictatorship of the proletariat, meaning the rule in favor of the workers. And that's exactly what's going on in West Germany, Sweden, and many other West European countries. The rule, democratic rule in favor of workers by the majority population, taxing the capitalist pigs to a point where they're suffering and trying to run away to Russia, as they do in France. So that's the point. Lenin was nothing like that. Lenin was not even interested in the well-being of the workers. In fact, the contrary, he would say workers can only develop trade union consciousness, which means workers are only interested in bread and butter issues. They're only interested in material well-being. And that's all they're interested in. We have to imbue them with proletarian consciousness, which means we have to make revolution for them. Seize power and transform society. As I told you before, this is not Marx. This is Pyotr Tkachev. This is Russian revolutionaries of the preceding generation who created a new formula. First you seize power and then you transform society. That's not Marxism. That's the opposite of Marxism. If Marx heard Lenin say that, he would have said, you're an idiot. It has nothing to do with what I'm trying to teach you. It's impossible. You cannot rearrange stages of history. Now, in my other lecture, I argued, Lenin proved that Marx was wrong. How is that? Well, it is possible. It is possible to do, and he did it. You seize power, you transform society from above, by a revolutionary from above, not some stages of development, but you can change things the way around, the way it goes. He did it, Mao Zedong did it, and others did it. Fidel Castro did it, many others did it. So that's the point. Marx was wrong in stages of development. Yes, they go if things go the way they're going, but there are some revolutionary leaders who can rearrange the stages by action from above. In any case, the big argument that fascinated me from my entire career, that I started my studies in the graduate school and then wrote 5 books about, is the studies of the nature of Marxism. And the division of the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks is exactly about that. And I think that division crystallizes the entire development of European socialism in the 20th century. The division of both who want to change things from above in the name of workers, these are communists, and slow evolutionary change through democracy, through the rule of the majority in favor of workers. These are European social democrats. So it all came out in Lenin versus Marx debates, which I analyzed and wrote a book about, and where essentially Lenin says we're going to create a professional organization of revolutionaries. They have to be professionals. We're going to pay them money. They're going to do full-time job, revolutionary activity, agitation, propaganda, bank robberies, organizing of military squads that would seize power when we need to. That's Lenin, very similar to SRs. In fact, at one of my lectures, I said, Lenin is an SR spy in the Marxist movement. And then you have the Mensheviks, Martov, who basically says, it's a working class movement, working class, not ours. We are just helping the workers to get organized, to become a majority, to get elected to the parliament, and then to have a reform agenda through democracy. So one of the major mistakes that Americans have, they think that all Marxists are Bolsheviks, that they think that all Marxists are necessarily communists of the Lenin variety, which is of course totally wrong, because actually it's anti-Marxist. The true Marxists are the Mensheviks, the true Marxists are the Social Democrats who actually do believe in democracy. Yes, Marxism and democracy is identical, because it is stages of history, it is slow development of capitalism until workers get elected to the parliament and have a majority and rule in favor of the majority of the population, which is the working masses, as opposed to the capitalists who are basically engaged in expropriation of surplus value, which means in theft, as Proudhon put it. So this is the split. Bolsheviks, Mensheviks, they do become both separate independent political parties in Russia. And in the 1917 revolution, the Mensheviks are doing very well. They are in the provisional government together with the socialist revolutionaries. They are the ones who are running Russia in 1917 as a democratic republic, Prime Minister Kerensky. And they are the ones who get overthrown by a coup d'etat, exactly as Lenin originally meant it. Striking force seizes power, transforms society, and this is what happened, and it's known as the Bolshevik Revolution of November 1917. And on that note, my dear boys and girls, we're going to stop. Thank you very much. Tell your friends that the best Russian history explanations are with Dr. Brovkin in his series, Russian History with Dr. Brovkin. Thank you.